الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Our first group of fasting is the group of obligatory fasts, and they are the fasts that are wajib. The first one being most obviously the one that we are fasting now, the fast of the month of Ramadan, which is an obligatory fast. The second one, which has a bit of conjecture amongst the people and questions with this regard, is the fasting that is owed by a father and that his son has to perform. And this son is the eldest living son. So if the oldest son dies before the father dies, then the next son in line has to perform these. And these are not the fasts that are owed, that are written in the will. The ones that are written in the will, they get sorted with the 1/3 of the money that the father leaves over. They are the fasts that the eldest son and people around know that are owed by the father. The ones that are owed by the father. And we don't have to take the greatest amount. Say, for example, I have a certainty that my father owed 3 years of fastings in 3 Shahr Ramadans. 3 months, I had certainty, and I doubt if he owed 4 or 5. I stick to the 3. In fact, you don't really have to investigate. Say I find out someone's going to turn up and tell me, listen, and I have a feeling this guy's going to say, your father has a few more years, I can take off before this guy turns up. I really don't have to investigate the matter. So that's one of the things. Some people will come up and say, what about when it comes to the mother? There's a bit of deliberation between the maraja here. But the more what's commonly known and the majority stick with what's been done for the father. However, some will say that as a precaution also the mother. Once again, if you've only got girls, these girls are not obligated, none of them, in order to fulfill your fast. The eldest son also gets what's called the habwa. He gets the clothing. This is really not of any significance today, but he gets the clothing of the father, the ring of the father, the weapon, which isn't common. People don't really have weapons anymore around them. Like none of us here are usually people you would have a scabbard on them all the time. They'd have a sword or they have a khanjar or something like that, a little dagger, which you see is uncommon these days, and they'd get that weapon as well. The other thing, the third one, that is obligatory is the qada fast, the fast that you owe from Shahr Ramadan. Some people say, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Some people say, all right, I was sick, I don't need to. I've heard this too many times. People say, yeah, I was sick this month, and I'm sick the next month and the month after, and it's all the same sickness. My nose is going to bleed for the next 3 years. And they'll look for a way out. But if you're sick, you owe these fasts. These fasts are owed to you. We're not going to talk exactly about expiation, kafara and all that. We're just talking about what is owed. You owe the fasts that you have not performed because you travelled. You owe the fasts that you have not performed because you're sick. They're considered qada fasts, and they are fasts that have to be performed. And I want to remind you, don't look for the easy way out. I always remind these, don't look, all right, I'm feeling weak, I'm not going to fast. I've got a relative that's got Crohn's disease and they fast. And if you were to ask any doctor, if you asked even, a gastroenterologist who specializes with the digestive system, if you were to ask them and you mentioned Crohn's disease in front of them, they shudder when you mention it. It's one of these ghastly illnesses that affects the digestive and the system and stomach, and they still fast. And then I get someone that says, alaykum salam, I get someone that says, oh, I'm feeling a bit giddy. I feel a bit dizzy and I don't want to fast. So they always like to take the way out, the easy way out. Avoid this at all costs. The next fast that is obligatory, and I'm just going to go over them quickly, just to give you an outline, is the fasting when someone does i'tikaf, when someone remains in the mosque, or the main mosque, generally the 4 main mosques in the world, or the main mosque in the city. The first 2 days it's recommended that I fast, but once I've fulfilled the second day, the third day becomes obligatory. So that is another obligatory fast. And also, the next 2 have to do with Hajj. One is if I don't have a hadi. Some people can't afford to pay for the sheep back over there. It's got nothing to do with us. People that are paying over $9,000 to go to the Hajj can afford a sheep. But if you can't, then there's the 10 days that you fast. 3 days in the Hajj and 7 days in Rajatum, as the verse says in the Quran, which is 10 days collectively. Another one, and this could affect some people, if you've been to the Hajj. There's people that go Hajj, those ones that wait on the starting line? Those marathon runners that they always want to leave. They look, is the time up? I've got to leave Arafah to get to Muzdalifah. If you're one of those people that takes off from Arafah before Maghrib, you have to fast 18 days. And these 18 days are obligatory. They're another form of fast that is obligatory. Taban, one of the options is either you kill a camel, and I don't think many people want to pay $3,000-$4,000, or maybe even more, I don't know how much it costs now, so they can fast those 18 days instead. And the final 2 are the fast that's in a contract, which is basically where I promise someone to fast for their loved ones, deceased loved ones. That becomes obligatory upon me. Or a fast that is from an oath or an agreement that I make with God that I have to fulfill, which they call the nadhr, the ahad, or the yamin. Now, with the qasam, if I make one of these 3, they fall under the other categories. Generally, when you're studying jurisprudence, they fall under an obligation for these things. This is what we call the obligatory fast. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll cover the remaining of the issue. Let's continue with our story. Zulaykha or Zalikha, depends on how the pronunciation is, has attempted to seduce and entice Yusuf. Now, the aftermath is the chief has walked in and he's uncovered this. He's seen what's happened. And not only that, whenever an incident takes place and if it's only you and someone else and the chiefs, imagine it was only the chief, Zalikha or Zulaykha, and Nabi Yusuf, and that's it. The story would have been dead and buried then. But there was people around, and these people, they have friends, and their friends have friends. And what happens before you know it, you become everyone's masticating you, everyone's gnawing you in their gums. They're chewing on your flesh. Everyone's talking about what you did. And that's what Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran. وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها عن نفسه قد شغفها حبا إنا لنراها في ضلال مبين. You know what? The way that they made it and they're speaking, they say the wife of the chief has tried to seduce, and they use the word fataha. And this is another discussion. If you look up the term fata, generally it's given to a youth, or not every youth is considered a fata. And that's why we have the saying where they say, La fata illa Ali, salawatullahi alayh. So what's mentioned here is that they say this slave boy that she has, she's tried to seduce him. And then they mention the word قَدْ شَغَفَهَا حُبًّا. This means she's impassioned with desire for him. And they make her into a wanton woman, and they're talking about her. So then what happens? And she's hearing all this, she's got options in her head. So the Quran says, فَلَمَّا سَمِعَتْ بِمَكْرِهِنَّ أَرْسَلَتْ إِلَيْهِنَّ. See, firstly, when she heard what they were saying, she said, look, this can't go on. Let's call them all in. Some of the narrations say there were 4 of them, 5 in some narrations, some say 7, and some have other numbers. You know, sometimes it's a bit with, probably with the narrations, there could be a bit of Chinese whispers, you know, from the people narrating them, because the numbers do go up pretty big. Some of the narrations say 400 women. So, you know, it's a bit like one person passes the news to the next person. But whatever the number is that have turned up, it says here, وَأَعْتَدَتْ لَهُنَّ مُتَّكِئًا. So firstly, when they've come in, she's made them feel at home. She's brought them in. She's prepared for them a seating, and they're here to be treated as dignified guests. وَآتَتْ كُلَّ وَاحِدَةٍ مِّنْهُنَّ سِكِّينًا. So what she's done, she's given each one a knife. وَقَالَتْ أُخْرُجْ عَلَيْهِنْ. Then she says to Yusuf to come in. Now, you need to understand here, Yusuf, once again, we need to remind you, is a slave here. And he's under obligation to come in. Even though he knows what she's plotting, he's obligated to walk in. See, when he walks in, we need to understand here, these women become mesmerized with what they see. To the point Allah Azza wa Jal says that they cut their hands. So rather than cut the fruit that's in their hand, they cut their own hand. Because they are looking to themselves, you know, we heard that this Yusuf is attractive, but this is better than advertised. Look at the way he looks, to the point where they say, Hasha lillah. That Allah Azza wa Jal is free from imperfection. This is not a man. This is none but a noble angel. This is not a normal creation that could be there. Now, let's take a look at her objectives. And this is why these stories are important. Generally, you'll notice in society, when a bad habit comes into society or a bad thing happens in society, at first it's perceived as what? A wrongdoing, and then suddenly it becomes a common practice. Take a look at smoking, for example. When smoking first entered society, you know, anyone that was smoking was considered an azar in communities. Young guy smokes, youth never used to smoke in front of their parents because it was considered disrespect. But what happens? Have you ever noticed a smoker, when he lights up, what does he do? He tries and gives the person with him a cigarette to smoke too. Why? Why do they encourage others to smoke? So they can feel more normal about what they're doing. They don't want to feel like an outcast. They don't want to feel like the wrong person. And this happened with many things. This happened with the tattoo epidemic. The first person got a tattoo. Then he wanted, you know what, a tattoo would look sick on you. And then it's so important. Do you know how they sell it, people that get tattoos? Do you know how hard it is to get a booking to get a tattoo? They sell it that badly that the person goes, oh, do you have it? A person will call and say, look, I've got an open booking. So someone will run and just take it and get anything tattooed on their body because it's an open booking. This is what's happened now. And it's become so normal. At first, A person, the only people that had tattoos were who? Bikies were the only people that had tattoos, and sailors. Piercings, another thing. At first, piercings, you'd only find them on punks and homosexuals. And this is how it used to be. And now, then they went through a fad where they go, oh look, I got my earring on the left ear. Because if you had one earring on the left ear, it meant you weren't homosexual. But if you had two, you were. I don't know who comes up with these innovations. But in order to make it acceptable, and in order to make it into a norm, and this happened with gambling. People want to go gambling, they take others with them to have a slap at the pokies, so we're all in it together. Clubbing. How often do you see someone going to a club by themselves? You know, the shaitan's got these agents that want to take everyone with them to the club in order to trivialize the situation. Zulaykha here, by making them all turn up and seeing Yusuf, said, we're all the same. But you know what? I'm better than you. Why? Because you saw him in an instant and you cut your hands. I put up with this guy moving around my house for 7 years before I decided to lock the doors and make a move. One moment you cut your hands. So firstly, she trivialized the matter. Secondly, she brought up something that we're all very guilty of. You ever heard the proverb, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones? How often do you hear this proverb? Yet we're all guilty of it. We are all critics. We all come through with an opinion about everything. We all think, and I'm starting with myself, that we know what's best. You know, if it was me, this wouldn't have went down. You know, everyone is the best sports analyst. The new football coach comes in, he's going to win games. He's going to win championships. And you see that this hero becomes a villain instantaneously. You know, you saw that with Arsenal and Arsene Wenger. One day he was worshipped when he had the Invincibles. The next day they wanted his neck. And you saw that with Wayne Bennett when he was coaching Newcastle. One day they were overawed to have him. The next day they wanted him thrown out on the first plane. This is what happens when we think that I have the right situation. And guess what you're watching? When you're watching most shows, you're watching sports analysis, and you watch especially Lebanese or Arabic TV, everyone knows how to resolve the problems in the Middle East. Everybody. Everyone comes on and says, this is how it should be done. Everyone can quash poverty. Everyone has the opinion. And I'm speaking about myself first and foremost. We have an opinion on everything we see. Even Donald Trump had the audacity to make a hat that said, "Make America Great Again." That he actually thought, I can resolve this problem, because this is our problem. That Allah makes apparent in this story is we criticize everything. We judge everyone, we assess everyone's problem, and we think we know it best. I know how to fix this problem. I'm the one that knows. Look at the wife of the chief. She's chasing her slave boy. And everyone makes his opinions. And everyone has a house that's made of glass. We have our own issues. You know, you turn around, some people, honestly, they'll sit there and say, they'll see a heroin addict on the side of the road and say, look at this junkie. And then he'll pop a Xanax and he'll keep walking. But he's not a junkie. This is the way the world is. We just sit and we judge other people. We look at other people and make our opinions about people. Even those that, of the celebrities that talk about eating healthy. That I don't eat this many carbs, I don't do that. And then they go to their parties and they're on the rack the whole night. And they drink all different types of alcoholic beverages. But they eat healthy. I won't eat any food with preservatives. I won't eat this and that. And they have an opinion on everything. And we say this about those around us. If that person was my spouse, I would never allow this. If that was my child, I would never allow this. This is the way the humans think. But what we should do is look at ourselves. This is the problem you can solve. This is the real problem. The Jews came up to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, after the martyrdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they came up to him and said, look at you Muslims, you have not even buried your prophet. You have not even buried your prophet, and you've picked up differences about him. So look at where they come in. They start to criticize from our side. Now, Amir al-Mu'mineen replies to them and says, we are not, or we do not have, or we do not differ about him. We differ after him. Like our differences aren't about Rasulullah. Our differences are about the what? The vicegerency. Our differences are about the Khalifa, who is the Khalif. But he doesn't leave them there. He says, as for you, your feet had not dried from the sea, from the Red Sea, when they crossed the sea. He says, your feet had not dried from the sea, and you already asked your prophet to give you a god or an idol to worship like the idols you had seen. So in other words, you were squabbling while your prophet was alive. Our problems came after. So who are you to sit and criticize? Who are you to sit and give your opinion? Are we allowed to criticize others? Are we allowed to pass judgment? Are we allowed to make an assessment? If some people say, yes, we are in all times, this is wrong. And for those that say we cannot at all times, this is also wrong. There is a time in your religion where you have to assess. Think about it. When you come to pray and there's someone leading the prayer, how are we with our religion? Are we like the Saudi police officer that had the criminal and heard the adhan and said we have to pray? And he said to if I put the prisoner behind me, he's going to run. So he put him as the imam and prayed behind him. You know, are we of that opinion where we put a criminal and we pray behind them? Or are we some people that enter a masjid and we check for what? We have to find out the character of the one leading the prayer. This is my connection to the heavens. This Imam al-Jama'ah must be someone that's qualified. And there are rules, even for taqleed. Do we just look for the guy with the widest beard and the biggest turban? Okay? And the most silent amongst them say, yep, that's the guy we're going to follow. Or do we have to investigate this? We are expected to investigate this. We are supposed to criticize. We're supposed to assess. We're supposed to know who we're following. What about when it comes to marriage? Are we not supposed to assess the character? If the guy comes in, honestly, there should be doubt here, especially when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says to the people, I fear for you the hypocrites. Why? Because the unbeliever is apparent. The unbeliever hates you. It's in your face. He hates you. Your enemy is your enemy. As for the hypocrite, puts on the good face. He's the one with the 70 rings on the right hand and the masbahah, and he's got a turban mark that's been there. Sorry, he's got a turba mark. He's got a sajdi mark that's been there for God knows how long. And when you talk to him, he's always about to fall over from how much he's bending forward. So you can't tell, who am I actually talking to? And the second this guy comes and asks for your daughter's hand and you marry him, the next second you find out you married your daughter to a wife beater. A kafar deen, someone that swears about God and swears about religion. And you go, what the hell did I just marry to? But you were supposed to assess. You were supposed to find out who you were marrying your daughter to. You were supposed to investigate this. I'm supposed to check there. Even when I'm doing business, I'm about to do business with someone, I just don't pick up any random. One person came up to me and said, I did business with someone that you know. I said, did you ask me? And he said, I saw him with you once. I said, where'd you see him with me? He said, you were talking to him once outside a centre. This is how he linked him to me. He saw him outside talking to me at a centre. You imagine someone said that to a criminal lawyer? I did business with your clients. I saw you talking to him outside of a courtroom. You can't just assess like that. You have to ask, who is this person? I'm supposed to do business with. But generally, I'm not supposed to judge others and look at others indifferently. Because how will I fare when I come to the trials that they have befallen? I remember something I've seen for Sayyid Muhammad al-Sadr, where he says that we get up and we send la'an upon the Abbasi Khalif like Harun. Which isn't a wrong thing. He's not saying this is a wrong thing. What he's saying is, if you were in his place, you think about this, is how would you fare? Harun used to actually speak to the clouds. You know, we can't even get a word in with our kids. He used to speak to the clouds. This guy was on another level altogether when it comes to communication. He would talk to the cloud and say to the cloud, it doesn't matter where you sit or where you're going to rest, where you drop your rain will fall on my land. This is how big his sovereignty was, his rulership was. So he said, before you say something, how would you fare if you were in his position? Think about it. If I want to think about how I would fare, you want to really understand, how do you fare when you comes to what you control in your house? For those that have control in their house. For those that don't have control, you know, I'm with you, brother. I'm feeling what you're feeling. But those that do have control, are they a tyrant in their house? Are they abusive towards their wife and their kids? Because if they are, if they were in the position of Harun, they'd be just like Harun. Just you don't have the sovereignty that Harun had. Another point that I really remember, and these are things that really shaped the way I thought. Back when I was 22, there was the Tahrir in Lebanon, when the Zionist entity left the south of Lebanon. And I remember at the time, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said to the people that they were not allowed to touch any of the collaborators, any of the Lahdis. And being a 22-year-old, thinking I know everything, I was sitting watching news with my father, Allah yarhamu, and I said to my father, I said, why is Sayyid Hassan saying this? They should kill them all. They're all collaborators. This is how we think, you know. Killed a lot of them. They all collaborated. And my father said, how can you say this? Were you in their position? If you were there, what would you have done? How can you test them? How can you pass judgment? And this is something you need to think. How can I pass judgment on others? If I was there, how would I have fared? This is for everything. Who am I to pass judgment? He said the decision he's made is the correct one. You're not supposed to kill these people. You're not supposed to harm these people. The killers, they get killed. But you need to judge everyone on an individual basis. How would you have been had you been put in that test? Iblis, did he not fail his test? 6,000 years of worship. This is the fear I need to have. 6,000 years of worship that Iblis had, he sold it in a moment, refusing to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam. This refusal of prostration cost him what? Everything. And because he was too haughty and too self-conceited and too proud, he never turned back. He never went back and repented and made amends for what he's done. When I look at the stories in the Quran, we may look at them and we say this is an enjoyable tale, but each part of the story has very important lessons. Just in this segment, we have learned, one, that when someone does something bad, they want to trivialize the act so everyone can do it too, so they can become a commoner and not an outcast. And secondly, not to pass judgment, lest we be tried the same and we fall even worse. Like the wives, the women of Egypt, they passed judgment at the wife of the chief. For 7 years of her suffering with the presence of Yusuf, they couldn't even handle a moment with the brilliance of his face. They couldn't even handle a moment. Inshallah, tomorrow night we continue the final night about the chief's wife. Another important lesson that we gather from there. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to emancipate us all from the fire of hell in this month. that this night does not pass until everyone of the believers, your brothers and sisters that require your dua, are emancipated from the fire of hell. Be very generous when it comes to your prayers. Ask Allah to guide your believing brothers and sisters and save them from the fire of hell. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذه ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه. وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.